On the morning of her graduation, Leora Namsen stood among thousands of students dressed in navy gowns, yet she felt strangely invisible. When her name echoed through the stadium speakers, Leora S. Namsen, Master of Data Analytics, she instinctively turned toward the front rows, expecting to see someone raise a hand or wave proudly. The sunlight reflected off the cold metal seats in the family section, each one empty, each one loudly reminding her of who wasn't there. She forced a smile for the photographer, lifting her diploma a little too high, pretending the moment still mattered. Around her, proud families cheered. Fathers lifted children onto their shoulders, mothers cried into tissues, siblings recorded shaky videos full of joy. Leora stood alone, whispering to herself, "Just breathe. It's fine. You did this alone anyway." She watched confetti float in the air like tiny pieces of happiness meant for everyone else. When her classmate, a bubbly girl named Rui, approached with her parents, Rui shouted, "You did it, Leora." Her parents snapped cheerful pictures. Rui glanced around and asked, "Where's your family?" "Running late." Leora replied with her practiced lie, "Yeah, they're on their way." Her voice didn't crack, but something inside her did. She held her gown tighter, wishing for a moment she could disappear inside it. After the ceremony, Leora walked slowly toward the parking lot, letting the noisy joy wash past her like water she couldn't hold. She watched balloons bump against the sky, heard horns honking, saw families hugging so tightly their shoulders shook. She reached her old silver car and sat inside, closing the door but leaving the world visible through the windshield. She imagined, just for a heartbeat, her mother running toward her, waving, shouting, "That's my girl." She pictured her younger sister, Ray, dancing around in glitter shoes. She pictured her father with a bouquet he probably wouldn't know how to hold. Then the image dissolved like steam on a mirror. Her phone stayed silent. No missed calls. No congratulatory text. Nothing. Leora leaned back, sighing. She whispered, "Why am I still surprised?" Because truthfully, this wasn't new. They had skipped her college graduation too. Back then, her mother had simply said, "Ray has finals," as if that erased everything. Her father hadn't even called. Leora gripped the steering wheel, fighting the familiar ache of being an afterthought. She told herself, "This is the last time I let this break me," even though she didn't believe it yet. Growing up, Leora had learned that in her family, love sounded like invoices. Every request came wrapped in polite guilt. When she was 16, she worked early shifts at a cafe, waking before sunrise to serve tired nurses and hurried lawyers. Her mother would text her, "Thanks, honey. Ray needs piano lessons," or a field trip came up, send something small. Leora sent money even when she had none. She believed that if she helped enough, if she worked hard enough, being valued would eventually follow. But all she earned was more expectation. Whenever she hesitated, her mother would say, "Family helps family," as if it were a law carved into stone. Leora learned to respond, "Okay, I'll figure it out," even when she was drowning. For years she thought being useful was the same as being loved. She only learned the truth later. They didn't see her as a daughter. They saw her as a dependable resource with a beating heart. Determined to change her future, Leora threw herself into graduate school. She studied late into the night, convinced a master's degree would buy her respect, maybe even affection. She pictured her mother proudly saying, "Look at what my eldest achieved." But the hope faded as graduation day approached and no plans were discussed. 3 days after the ceremony, her cap and gown still hung on the door like ghosts of joy. That morning her phone buzzed. Her mother's message read, "Need $200 for Ray's Sweet 16. No congratulations. No questions about how the ceremony went. Not even a simple, 'How are you feeling?' Just another transaction disguised as a conversation." Leora stared at the message for a long time and whispered, "Of course." She felt something shift quietly inside her, a small tired voice rising finally into strength. For years, Leora had trained herself not to react, not to feel disappointed. But this time was different. The silence after graduation had carved a new clarity inside her. She opened her banking app and winced at the meager amount she had saved. Barely $3,000. She whispered, "I can't keep doing this." Her thumb hovered over the keypad. Instead of sending what her mother demanded, she typed in $1, added the note "Congrats," and pressed send. When the notification flashed "Transaction complete," Leora felt her chest loosen for the first time in years. She stood, walked to the drawer near the door, and picked up the spare apartment key her mother insisted on keeping for emergencies. Leora dropped it into the trash and said softly, "Not anymore." That night she called a locksmith. When the older man finished installing the new lock, she thanked him quietly. As he left, she touched the cool metal and whispered, "My door. My rules." The next morning sunlight filled her small apartment, warm and peaceful. She made coffee and enjoyed the silence like it was something rare and precious. For the first time, no one could walk in without permission. No one could demand anything. "So this is what peace sounds like," she said to herself, smiling. But just as she lifted her mug for another sip, a heavy knock rattled her front door. Then another. Firm. Rhythmic. Intentional. Leora froze. Her mind raced. Not the landlord, she always calls first. Cautiously, Leora looked through the peephole and saw two police officers standing in the hallway. One of them, a calm man with warm eyes, said, "Miss Nomsen." Her stomach tightened as she opened the door. "Yes." The officer lifted his badge. "We received a call from your mother. She reported that you've been acting erratically, changing locks, ignoring calls, and she's worried you might harm yourself." Leora stared, stunned. She said, "What?" The officers stepped inside after she nodded. They scanned her clean apartment, her laptop open to job applications, her diploma framed on the wall, her coffee still steaming. The taller officer asked gently, "Do you feel like hurting yourself?" Leora almost laughed. "No. I feel like protecting myself." The officer's mouth twitched into a sympathetic, almost smile. "We just need to confirm you're safe. Sometimes when people start setting boundaries, others get alarmed." Leora swallowed. "Yes, well, she doesn't like the word no." They nodded and completed their brief report. As they prepared to leave, the officer said, "If she calls again, reference this visit. You're fine. Completely fine." When the door closed behind them, Leora leaned against it, shaking, not in fear, but in a fury so deep it almost steadied her. She whispered, "She really called the police because I changed my lock." That night Leora sat on her couch replaying everything. All the guilt, all the years of financial pressure, all the small manipulations wrapped in motherly tone. She finally saw it clearly. Her mother didn't want a daughter. She wanted access, control, a reliable source of income with a soft heart. Leora whispered, "No more." She hadn't heard from her mother since the police visit, but she knew silence from a manipulator wasn't peace. It was planning. The next morning she woke early, made coffee and opened her laptop. She intended to apply for jobs, but instead she opened her banking app. Two unfamiliar credit inquiries blinked back at her. Her breath caught. Capital One. Discover. She hadn't applied for anything. When she opened her credit report and saw two accounts opened in her name using her parents' address, her vision blurred. Then she saw the charges, thousands spent on event venues, DJs, glam studios. She whispered, "Avray's Sweet 16. Her hands trembled as she called the number on the statement. "This is Leora Nomsen. I need to report identity theft." The representative verified her information, then said carefully, "This account was opened at our Littleton branch. Co-applicant, Linda M. Nomsen." Leora closed her eyes. Her mother's name sat on the screen like a bruise. When the call ended, Leora sat in silence until the room stopped spinning. Then she opened her voice recorder, Colorado allowed one-party consent, and dialed her mother. Her mother answered sharply, "So you're alive?" Leora asked calmly, "Why are there two credit cards under my name with your address?" Her mother laughed, a brittle practice sound. "Oh, that. I was helping you build credit. You should be grateful. It's family money. What's yours is ours." Leora exhaled slowly. "No. What's mine is mine. And what you did is under investigation." The silence that followed was the most honest moment they had ever shared. Leora did not wait for the paperwork to arrive. She went to meet her parents the way people meet their past, carefully, in public, and with witnesses. The diner she chose smelled of burnt coffee and old vinyl booths, a neutral place where no one could claim privacy. Her mother, Linda, arrived first in a floral dress that seemed like armor. Her father, Joran, shuffled in behind her, smaller somehow than the man Leora remembered. Avray walked in last, her phone already a shield between them. Linda slid into the booth and said, "You called us here for what?" "I have plans." Leora set a plain brown folder on the table and let it slide toward them. Inside were copies of statements, the bank's fraud alert, and printed receipts. She watched Linda's practice smile thin. "What is this?" Linda asked, fingers trembling only slightly. "These are 2 credit cards opened in my name," Leora said. "Both tied to your address. Both with charges for Avray's party." When the words landed, the room changed. The waitress paused with a pot of coffee. Joran's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Avray's eyes flashed with embarrassment and then annoyance. "You did this," Avray muttered. Linda's voice stayed smooth. "I did what any mother would do. I helped you build credit." Leora's hands did not shake. "You forged my signature. You turned my name into a receipt." Around them, others pretended not to listen, but the booth hummed with the electricity of truth finally spoken. Linda snapped, "Don't make this a scene." Her words were meant to cut, to shame Leora into silence. Leora heard what her mother wanted: submission, and refused it. "The bank is already investigating," she said. "The accounts are frozen. I filed a report." Linda's eyes flicked to Joran, begging for a calm he did not know how to give. Joran mumbled, "We can fix this privately, Leora. Don't ruin everything." Leora opened her mouth and let years of small injustices fold into one steady sentence. "You ruined it long ago when you turned my life into a ledger. I paid for my education with shifts you told me to take. I paid for my own books and then handed you the receipts. Don't tell me about what's ruined." Avray's face flushed. "You don't understand," Avray said, voice small. "I thought you were helping." "Helping?" Leora echoed. "You thought stealing my name was help?" A hush fell and someone at the counter coughed. Linda's hands fisted in her lap. For a moment, the family looked like strangers who shared DNA but not history. Then Linda leaned forward, voice cold and dangerous. "You'll regret this." Leora stood up. "I already did. I regret letting it go on." She left the folder on the table and walked out before Linda could find another way to hurt her. Outside, the air tasted like rain. Leora sat in her car beside the steering wheel and let herself tremble, not with fear but with a fierce, exhausted relief. She whispered to no one, "It's over." She drove home slowly, as if speed could not outrun the memory of that booth. That evening, the city glittered with other people's celebrations. Cherry Creek's lights twinkled like a different life. Leora did not need to be included. She brewed tea and opened the email the bank had sent. Fraud investigation escalated. A cold clarity moved through her limbs. She wasn't looking for revenge. She was looking for boundaries. When the call came from the bank's fraud department later that night, she answered with calm. "We'll be verifying transactions tonight at Cherry Creek Events," the woman explained. Leora's heart tightened. Not from panic but because she knew what would happen when truth walked into a room full of lies. At 8:45 p.m., she sat on her couch with the window open and watched distant music float through the air. She did not go to the party. She did not need to. She watched the city hold its breath while someone else's choices unraveled in public. 40 minutes later, texts began to arrive. Avray sent a flurry. "What did you do? Police are here." DJ stopped. "People are whispering." Another. "Mom is freaking out. They said your name." Leora did not respond. She let the messages roll over each other like waves. Across town, 2 officers and a bank representative stepped into a banquet hall lit with neon and expectation. The banker opened a thick folder and read names and receipts aloud while guests exchanged confused looks. Linda's face drained color. Avray stood frozen near the cake table, eyes wet and wide. Someone said, "Isn't that your daughter?" And Linda's mouth opened but did not find a story that matched the evidence. The DJ unplugged equipment in a flurry of awkwardness. The party that had been crafted to make Avray shine collapsed into a slow, shameful silence as guests filed out and cameras captured the moment. For Leora, the sound was not triumph. It was the steady click of accountability doing the work she could not force alone for years. The fallout moved quickly. In Littleton, gossip spread in church parking lots, grocery aisles, and social feeds. People whispered about the Reeds as if they had been waiting for scandal to prove their suspicions. A Ray's party video circulated. 30 seconds of stunned faces and a bank representative reading receipts. Leora watched the clips in the quiet of her apartment and felt no joy in seeing her family's collapse. She felt a strange, fierce pity. Joran lost face at work where colleagues had received forwarded posts. Linda's name surfaced in many small, judgmental conversations. The community's judgment felt like a double-edged thing, satisfying and lonely at once. Leora printed the bank's final confirmation letter and pinned it beside her diploma and the locksmith receipt. 3 small documents that meant more to her than a dozen polite smiles ever had. Proof of effort, proof of protection, proof of a life she had built. When people asked her why she had done it, she answered plainly, "Because I had to keep my name." In the weeks that followed, Leora took practical steps. She froze her credit, filled out FTC forms, and closed accounts that had allowed others access to her life. She met with a fraud specialist who walked her through the labyrinth of identity recovery with patient clarity. "You did the right thing," he said, tapping a pen against a form. Leora repeated the words to herself like a quietly earned mantra. She also set new routines. She began each morning with a list. Applications sent, calls returned, lunches scheduled. Work at Nova Data Labs came through, a small role at first, then something steadier. The office was not her family, but people there treated her like someone whose work mattered. "You built this," her new supervisor Mara said once when Leora felt small. "We see what you do." Leora tucked the praise away like a seed. It grew slowly into confidence that did not depend on anyone's approval but her own. Linda did not apologize in the way Leora had imagined. There was no dramatic phone call of remorse, no confession over coffee. Instead, the apologies came in fragments. A stiff text about misunderstandings, a cautious voicemail suggesting maybe we can try to talk. Leora listened and then let the calls go to voicemail. When Avray tried to reach out with a message that said, "I didn't know, I'm sorry," Leora replied honestly, "You were part of it. I need time." It was not cruelty, it was boundary. In counselor sessions, she learned to name feelings that had lived in her chest for years: shame, resentment, a quiet hope that had never been returned. She learned tools. How to say no, how to close accounts, how to let silence be an ally rather than an enemy. Friends gathered, Rui and a few others, people who showed up not out of obligation but because they cared. "You deserve to be celebrated," Rui said, bringing over a small cake and a crooked candle. They toasted quietly to a future that would be measured by her choices, not her sacrifices. Months passed and the sharp edges of humiliation smoothed into a different shape, one that fit around Leora's life without cutting. She moved into a slightly larger apartment, a place that smelled more like her than the last. She bought a small plant and learned to keep it alive. At Nova Data Labs, she worked on projects that made her proud. Cleaning messy data, building models that told clear stories. The work was quiet, exacting, and honest. When she hung her employee badge beside her diploma, she felt a steady heat of accomplishment that did not need anyone else's approval. Once, Linda left a short note slipped under her door. "We miss you." Leora folded the note and set it in a drawer. She did not burn it. She did not answer. She was learning that missing someone did not automatically mean forgiving the way they used you. One windy autumn afternoon, Leora walked through a park with leaves cracking underfoot, thinking about how few simple moments can change a life. She remembered the locksmith's hands, the bank's confirmation letter, the police officer who had said, "People panic when others set boundaries." She smiled at the memory of it, not because she wanted to relive the pain but because every step had been necessary. She called her friend Rui and said, "Let's get coffee." When they sat with steaming cups between them, Rui asked softly, "Do you ever regret it?" Leora looked at the steam rising and answered, "No, not the things I did to keep myself." She had not expected the freedom to feel so ordinary. No applause, no fanfare, just the steady rhythm of work, small joys, and quiet evenings. The silence was no longer an absence but a choice. She had changed the locks not only on her door but on her life, and for the first time she could hear herself clearly. One evening, as winter crept slowly toward Denver, Leora received a message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it, expecting another stray reminder of her past. Instead it read, "We haven't seen you in a long time. Are you sure you're okay?" She recognized the tone. It was the kind of question someone asked when they wanted to reopen control, not connection. She did not reply. Later that night, the doorbell rang. Leora peeked through the peephole and saw Joran standing alone, clutching his coat like a shield. She opened the door only halfway. "Why are you here?" she asked. Joran sighed. "Your mother isn't doing well. The neighbors talk. She says you embarrassed her." Leora folded her arms. She embarrassed herself. Joran shifted uneasily. "Maybe just talk to her?" Leora shook her head. "No. Not until she apologizes for what she did. Not for how it looked." Joran stared at the floor. "She won't admit she was wrong. Then she won't hear my voice," Leora answered softly. For a moment Joran looked like he wanted to argue. Instead he whispered, "You're stronger than she knows." Leora closed the door gently, not in anger but in acceptance. Some doors needed closing so others could open. The next day at work, Leora found comfort in the ordinary rhythm of typing and data models. Her coworker Tyvan, a quiet analyst with round glasses, leaned toward her desk and said, "You look lighter today." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I finally stopped carrying things that weren't mine." Tyvan nodded as if he understood secrets without needing them spoken aloud. During lunch, the team gathered at a long table, laughing over someone's attempt at baking. Leora watched them and realized something. She felt safe here. Not because everyone understood her, but because no one used her. Later, Mara pulled her aside. "There's an upcoming project about predictive health data. You've been doing excellent work. Would you like to lead it?" The question startled her. "Me?" "Yes," Mara said. "You've earned it." For a moment, Leora felt a warmth she had not felt in years, pride without guilt attached. She said, "Yes, I'd like that." When she walked home that evening, she whispered into the cold air, "This is what growing feels like, isn't it? Not loud, not dramatic, just gentle and real." Weeks passed, and the weight of her family's chaos faded into background noise. One Saturday morning, Leora visited a thrift bookstore she loved. The old bell above the door chimed softly as she entered. She ran her fingers across worn book spines until she found a journal with a dark green cover. The owner, a sharp-eyed woman named Ketha, said, "Ah, that one needed the right person." Leora chuckled. "Does it come with magic?" "Only the kind you write yourself," Ketha replied. At home, Leora opened the journal and let her pen wander. For the first time, she wrote not about survival but about possibility. She wrote small things, dreams of traveling, of adopting a cat someday, of learning how to cook something other than noodles. She wrote about boundaries too. Later, she met Rui at a cafe. Over warm pastries, Rui asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" Leora stirred her tea slowly. "Forgiving isn't the same as returning. I can forgive from a distance." "And if they change?" Rui asked. Leora smiled gently. "Then they'll have to walk toward me. I'm done doing all the walking." The words felt light on her tongue. One snowy afternoon, Leora received an email from a community organization asking if she would speak about financial boundaries and identity protection. At first she laughed. Her? Speaking at an event? But the organizer, Ms. Arvin, wrote, "Your case helped others understand fraud better. Your perspective matters." Leora almost declined. Then she remembered the police officer's words. People panic when others set boundaries. Maybe someone needed to hear the truth from someone who lived it. She rehearsed in her apartment, pacing between her window and her bookshelf. Her voice trembled the first few times she said, "You're allowed to protect yourself." But when the night of the event arrived, she stood behind a small podium, looked at the rows of faces, students, parents, young adults, and spoke clearly. She told her story without bitterness, only honesty. Afterward, a girl approached her with watery eyes. "My mom opens my mail without asking," the girl said. "Is that wrong?" Leora placed a hand gently on her arm. "If it hurts you, then yes. And you're allowed to say that." As the girl left, Leora felt something unexpected. Purpose. The seasons shifted again, and Leora found her life settling into something stable and warm. She bought a second plant and kept that one alive too. She cooked more, slept more, smiled more. But one day, She found a handwritten envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a letter from Linda. The handwriting looked strained, almost unwilling. "I don't know how to fix this," it began. "I didn't think you would ever turn against the family." Leora exhaled slowly. It wasn't an apology. It was a plea for control dressed as self-pity. But near the end of the letter, one line caught her attention. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you." It wasn't enough, but it wasn't nothing. She folded the letter and placed it between the pages of her journal. That evening Rui called. "Did you answer?" Leora shook her head, though Rui couldn't see. "Not yet. Not until she understands I'm not the same girl she raised." Rui hummed. "You're allowed to be whole without their permission." "I know," Leora whispered. And she meant it. Spring arrived with soft winds and sunlight that made Denver glow. Leora began leading her project team at Nova, guiding meetings with quiet confidence. Her co-workers respected her, not for what she gave but for what she brought. One afternoon, Mara introduced her to the department head, who praised her model work. "Your structure is clean," he said. "It's clear you think deeply before you speak." Leora smiled, surprised at how natural the praise felt now. Later that week, she attended a small company gathering. People mingled with drinks, laughter bouncing off the walls. Tyven approached her, adjusting his glasses nervously. "You're really doing well," he said. "You seem brighter." Leora laughed softly. "It's the sunlight. And maybe the peace." Tyven nodded before saying, "If you ever want a study partner or, well, just someone to talk to, I'm around." His awkwardness was endearing. Leora replied, "I'd like that." It wasn't romantic, just a gentle friendship forming. A new connection free of demands and history. When she walked home that night, she let herself imagine a future with soft things, trust, friendship, calm. But healing is rarely a straight line. One evening, Leora received a call from an unknown number. She answered cautiously. Linda's voice filled the line thin, uneven. "Leora, please. Can we talk?" Leora felt her spine stiffen. "What do you want?" she asked. "People are saying things. I can't go anywhere without hearing whispers." Leora closed her eyes. "Mom, the whispers aren't my doing. They're the consequences of your choices." Linda sniffed. "You weren't supposed to make it public." Leora's voice sharpened. "I didn't make anything public. You committed fraud. The bank acted." Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. Then Linda whispered, "I miss you." The words might have mattered once, but now they felt like threads too thin to hold weight. "I need boundaries," Leora said. "And I need honesty." Linda didn't answer that. Instead she said, "So you're leaving us behind?" Leora shook her head slowly. "No. You pushed me away long before I walked." She ended the call gently, not angrily. Growth does not mean returning to what broke you. That night, Leora sat by her window, watching the city lights shimmer like quiet promises. She opened her journal and wrote a single sentence. "I choose myself without apology." It felt like the most honest thing she had ever written. Over the next few days she crafted a long message to her mother. Not cruel, not soft, just true. She wrote, "I am not your enemy, but I will not be your resource. If you want a relationship with me, it must be one built on honesty, not demands." She did not send it immediately. Instead, she carried the draft in her journal, testing how it felt inside her chest. At work, she noticed she was speaking more in meetings, offering suggestions with a steadier voice. Mara smiled proudly during one presentation. "You've grown," she said later. Leora answered, "I stopped shrinking. Even small things changed." She redecorated her apartment with warm lights and soft blankets. She cooked a new recipe without burning it. She laughed more easily. The quiet was no longer empty. It was full of possibility. One afternoon, Leora bumped into Ketha, the bookstore owner, while walking home. "Still writing in the green journal?" Ketha asked. Leora grinned. "Every day." "Good," Ketha said. "You look like someone who decided her life belongs to her now." Leora chuckled. "I guess I did." They spoke for a few minutes, exchanging small stories. Before leaving, Ketha added, "Don't be afraid to let new things into your life. You've already let the worst go." The words settled in Leora's chest like warm stones. When she got home, she finally reread the draft message to her mother. She didn't send it. Not yet. But she no longer felt fear when she looked at her mother's name. The power had shifted, not to cruelty but to balance. She whispered, "I survived them. Now I get to build me." And for the first time she believed completely that the future she wanted was already forming in front of her, step by steady step. Summer drifted slowly into the city, wrapping Denver in warm evenings and long golden sunsets. Leora found herself taking walks after work, letting her thoughts settle like dust in sunlight. One evening, she sat on a quiet park bench with her journal open on her lap when a familiar voice called, "Hey, you're out late." It was Tyven holding 2 iced teas. "I figured you'd pick the sweeter one," he said awkwardly, offering her the cup. Leora laughed. "You guessed right." They talked for a while about work, about music, about how fast the year was going. At some point Tyven said softly, "You know, you're different now. Stronger. Happier." Leora looked at the sky and replied, "I think I just stopped giving people the versions of me they wanted." Tyven nodded slowly, as if her words made perfect sense. "If you ever need someone to walk with," he said, "I'm around." Leora didn't promise anything, but she smiled and said, "I'll remember that." She didn't feel pressure. She didn't feel watched. She simply felt seen, maybe for the first time in a long time. Work at Nova continued to bloom. Leora's project team trusted her calm voice, her clean structure, her way of making complicated problems feel solvable. During a meeting, the department head said, "Your model reduced error margins by 12%. That's no small feat." Leora blinked, surprised. "Thank you." After the meeting, Mara leaned close and whispered, "You're becoming one of the best analysts on this floor." Leora felt a small rush of warmth, earned, not demanded. Later, she walked into the break room where her coworkers were laughing about a data glitch that had turned names into vegetables. Tyven waved her over. "Come see, you're listed as Cabbage Namsen." Leora burst into unexpected laughter, the kind that shook her whole chest. "Better cabbage than carrot," she joked. The room erupted. For a moment, the heaviness that once lived in her bones felt far away. She realized she wasn't just healing, she was belonging. One weekend, Rui convinced her to attend a small street market downtown. The air smelled like cinnamon pastries and warm bread. Musicians played soft guitar chords, and vendors displayed handmade jewelry. Leora paused at a booth selling delicate rings made from twisted wire. The seller, an elderly woman with bright silver hair, said, "Those are for people stepping into new chapters." Leora lifted one ring, thin but beautifully crafted. "Does it really work?" she asked. The woman winked. "Only if you decide it does." Leora bought the ring and slipped it onto her finger. Later, as she and Rui shared fried dumplings, Rui asked, "Do you ever think about dating again?" Leora hesitated. "Maybe one day. But right now, I'm learning how to choose peace first." Rui nodded thoughtfully. Choosing peace is the best love story. As they walked home, the city lights shimmered through summer haze, and Leora held on to the feeling that her life was opening slowly, like a door she finally had the key to. A few weeks later, Leora received another letter from her mother, this one shorter, almost careful. "I'm attending a financial counseling class," Linda wrote. "They asked us to list people we hurt. Your name was on my list." Leora read the letter twice. It wasn't an apology yet, but it wasn't manipulation either. Rui read it too and said, "That sounds different. Still small but different." Leora folded the letter and replied, "Maybe she's trying. But trying doesn't mean I walk back." She placed the letter with the others, not tearing it, not returning it, just acknowledging it. That evening she called Joran. When he answered surprised, she said, "I saw the letter. I'm glad she's getting help." Joran exhaled. "She is changing, Leora." Slowly. Leora answered gently, "So am I." They didn't speak long, but something settled between them. A cautious understanding. Healing would never be linear, but maybe it didn't have to be painful every time. As autumn approached again, Nova Data Labs announced a regional conference. Mara tapped Leora's desk and said, "You should present your project. It's innovative and clearly documented." Leora felt her stomach tighten. A conference? With actual people? Mara grinned. "Yes, with actual people. Don't worry. You'll be great. Leora spent the next 2 weeks preparing slides, rehearsing her explanations, and battling the small voice in her head that whispered she wasn't ready. But when the day came, she stepped onto the stage of a medium-sized auditorium and looked out at faces waiting to learn from her. She took a slow breath. Good afternoon, she began. Her voice steadied as she talked through predictive models, missing data corrections and real-world impact. And when she finished, applause rose, warm, sincere. Someone asked, "How did you decide on this structure?" Leora answered, "I built the system I needed. Something clear. Something safe." When she stepped off the stage, Mara hugged her proudly. "See? Told you." Leora smiled. Maybe I needed to hear it. That evening after the conference, she and Tyven walked together toward the transit station. The city glowed in soft orange light. Tyven said, "You were incredible today. Confident. Clear. Like someone who finally trusts her own voice." Leora blushed lightly. "Thank you. I'm learning how to." They walked in comfortable silence until Tyven added, "I know your past wasn't easy. I'm not asking for anything complicated. But if you ever want company, I'd like to be someone you can trust." Leora looked at him carefully, not with fear but with curiosity. "You're patient," she said. "And kind. I appreciate that." Tyven chuckled nervously. "Is that a yes?" Leora smiled. "It's a not yet, but not a no." His shoulders relaxed and he nodded. "That's enough for me." It was the first time Leora allowed the idea of partnership without feeling like something was being taken from her. A few days later, Leora received an unexpected email from a detective who had handled part of her fraud case earlier in the year. "Your case is now formally closed," the message said. "Repayment completed. No further inquiries needed." She read the email 3 times, absorbing the finality of it. She forwarded it to her own inbox, wanting a copy that felt personal. That afternoon she printed it and added it to her small wall of milestones. Her diploma, her job badge, the locksmith receipt, the bank letter. She stepped back and stared at the collection. Each piece told a story, not of tragedy but of transformation. Later that night, she stood at her window watching city lights flicker against the dark sky. She whispered, "I made it out." Not in a dramatic way, not in triumph, but in deep grounded truth. The next weekend, Leora attended a small workshop hosted by the same organization she had spoken for months earlier. After the session, a young man approached her. "I just want to say your talk helped my sister. She finally set boundaries with our parents." Leora smiled, humbled. "I'm glad she's doing better." The man nodded. She said hearing someone else survive made her brave. Those words moved through Leora like warm water. She returned home feeling light. She opened her journal and wrote, "Sometimes the healing we do becomes a map for someone else." That evening, she cooked stew while music played softly in the background. For the first time in her adult life, she realized she wasn't living in reaction to pain. She was living toward something gentle, something honest, something hers. A few days later, Leora stood in her living room, adjusting a new frame on her wall. Inside it was a printed sentence she had written months prior. "I choose myself without apology." She placed it beside the old lock, forming a small sanctuary of symbols that told her story without speaking it. As she stepped back, her phone buzzed. A message from Linda. "I'm still learning. I'm trying. I hope one day you'll talk to me." Leora read it calmly this time. She didn't feel anger or guilt. She felt distance, the healthy kind. She typed a short reply. "Keep learning. I'm healing too." She didn't promise anything else. She didn't feel she had to. That night, she walked onto her balcony with a cup of warm tea. The city hummed softly below. For the first time, she understood that silence wasn't emptiness. It was ownership. She whispered to the wind, "I'm here. Really here." And she felt it. The first snow of the season arrived quietly, dusting rooftops and softening the edges of the world. Leora wrapped herself in a thick scarf and walked to a nearby cafe, a place she had begun visiting every Sunday. Inside, she ordered a warm drink and chose a corner seat near the window. As she sipped, she opened her journal and wrote about the small victories of the week. Finishing a project ahead of schedule, sleeping well for 3 nights in a row, laughing at work without forcing it. After a few minutes, she heard someone clear their throat. She looked up to see Tyven standing beside her table. "I was hoping I'd find you here," he said shyly. Leora gestured to the empty seat. "Sit." He slid in and handed her a small book. "I found this and thought of you. It's about building boundaries without guilt." Leora smiled warmly. "Thank you." They talked for nearly an hour, quiet, meaningful conversation. At one point, Tyven asked, "Do you ever think you'll let your mother back in?" Leora breathed out slowly. "Maybe. If she keeps choosing honesty over control. But I won't rush in to hurt again." Tyven nodded. "That's fair." Leora looked down at the book he gave her and whispered, almost to herself, "I'm learning how to build something new." And for the first time she didn't feel afraid of that future. December brought warmth to her life in unexpected ways. Nova Data Labs invited her to join a winter retreat, 3 days in the mountains dedicated to team bonding and reflection. Leora almost declined, worried she wouldn't fit into the social parts of the trip, but Mara insisted. "You belong with us," she said firmly. So Leora went. The lodge was quiet, wrapped in pine trees and silver frost. During a group activity, everyone shared something they were proud of. When it was her turn, Leora hesitated before saying, "I'm proud that I finally protected myself. It took me too long to learn how." Her voice trembled, but not from weakness. This time it was honesty. The room went silent for a moment. Then Tyven said softly, "That's brave." Others nodded in agreement. Later, as they walked outside under a sky thick with stars, Leora whispered, "Thank you for making space for me." Tyven smiled. "Space was always there. You're the one who stepped into it." His words settled beautifully in her heart. She realized she was no longer surviving. She was growing roots in her own life. After the retreat, Leora felt clearer than she had in years. She reorganized her apartment, cleaning out the last boxes of things she had kept just in case. She found old photos from childhood and sorted them into piles, things worth keeping, things worth letting go. In one picture, she saw a younger version of herself standing beside her mother, smiling too wide, as if trying to earn affection. She placed that photo in the drawer marked for later. Not to forget, just to revisit when the sting was gone. That afternoon she called Joran again. He answered quickly. "Leora." "Hi," she said softly. "I just wanted to check on you." Joran sounded surprised. "I'm all right. Your mother, she's still learning. It's slow." Leora nodded. "Healing usually is." Joran hesitated before saying, "We miss you." She didn't respond to that directly. Instead she said, "Tell her I saw her message. Tell her I'm not angry. But I need distance to stay whole." Joran sighed, sounding almost relieved. "That's fair." When the call ended, she felt lighter, not because she fixed anything but because she finally understood she didn't have to. As the new year approached, Leora was invited to speak again. This time not about fraud, but about emotional boundaries. The event was small, held in a community hall with folding chairs and the scent of warm cocoa. When she stood at the front, she said, "Sometimes healing looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like changing the locks. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace even when people call it selfish." A woman in the front row raised her hand and asked, "But how do you stop feeling guilty?" Leora answered, "By remembering that guilt is not a compass. It's a memory, and memories can be rewritten by choices made today." After the talk, several people lined up to thank her. One woman said, "Your words helped me breathe again." Another whispered, "I finally told my brother no." Leora listened carefully, offering gentle responses. When she walked home that evening, the cold air felt kind on her face. She whispered to herself, "Maybe all my storms had a purpose." In late January, Leora received a message from Avray. It wasn't dramatic or defensive, just a simple line. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how much Mom was taking from you. Can we talk when you're ready?" Leora sat on her couch and reread it several times. She felt neither anger nor urgency, just a soft ache of possibility. That night, she met Rui for dinner. She showed her the message and asked, "What do you think?" Rui studied it. "It sounds sincere," she said. "But sincerity doesn't erase harm. You decide when it's safe." Leora nodded slowly. "Maybe I'll talk to her. But not yet." Rui smiled gently. Healing has no deadline. Later, as Leora walked home, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would open the door only when she could do so without losing the pieces she had worked so hard to rebuild. February arrived with pale sunlight and long shadows. Leora began running in the mornings, letting her breath form small clouds in the cold air. One morning, as she returned from a jog, she stopped at the lobby mailbox. Inside was a small package with no sender listed. She carried it upstairs cautiously, opened it, and found a framed photograph, her graduation photo, the one she had never shared with her family. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "You deserve to be celebrated. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Mom." Leora sat down on the sofa, the frame resting in her hands. She felt a mix of grief, warmth, hesitation, and something like forgiveness trying to grow. She whispered, "This is a start." That evening, she placed the photo on a shelf, not with the other documents, but somewhere separate, somewhere gentle. She wasn't ready to call, but she wasn't ready to close the door forever either. March brought new energy. At work, Leora's project gained attention from another department, and she was asked to collaborate on a larger initiative. Mara said, "You're becoming a leader, Leora. People trust you." Leora felt the truth of that. She had built trust without bending herself into impossible shapes. After a long meeting one afternoon, Tyven approached her. "Would you like to get dinner sometime? Just us." Leora studied him, not cautiously but clearly. She felt no pressure, no fear of being used. She said, "Yes, I think I'd like that." Their dinner was simple: soup, bread, laughter. Tyven listened more than he spoke, and Leora found herself talking about books, travel dreams, and even her childhood without feeling exposed. When he walked her home, he didn't reach for her hand. He simply said, "Thank you for the evening." She smiled. "Thank you too." It wasn't the beginning of a romance. It was the beginning of trust. Slow, respectful, real. Spring returned with warm breezes and bright mornings. Leora began feeling something she had never experienced consistently: stability. She cleaned her apartment while music played, hosted Rui and 2 co-workers for a small dinner, and even bought a third plant, one with wide green leaves that reminded her of resilience. One evening, she gathered all the letters, receipts, reports, and photos connected to her past struggles. She arranged them neatly on her table, then carefully placed them into a single box. She didn't throw the box away. Instead, she labeled it "Closed Chapters." As she slid it onto a high shelf, she whispered, "I don't live there anymore." The moment wasn't dramatic. Didn't need to be. It was quiet, steady closure, the kind that changes a person from the inside out. She felt her chest expand with peace, a peace she no longer feared losing. 6 months after her life first began unraveling, Leora stood on her balcony, the Denver air cool against her face. The city hummed below, not loudly, not softly, just alive in its ordinary way. She looked at the old lock hanging on her wall, the framed sentence she wrote, the diploma she earned, the job badge she wore every weekday. They told one story. The story of a woman who chose herself at last. She whispered into the evening air, "If you've ever had to set a boundary just to breathe, you're not alone." She imagined someone out there listening, someone who needed to hear it. Then she lifted her phone and recorded a short message for an online forum. "Tell me where you're watching from," she said softly, "so I know how many of us finally changed the locks." She ended the recording smiling gently, not proud of the pain she endured, but proud of the person she became once she stopped apologizing for protecting her peace. And as the wind brushed past her, carrying the quiet promise of tomorrow, Leora felt ready for anything her new life would bring. Please subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from.